Yo.
You're not on screen.
I'm not on screen, but I am now.
No, you're not.
Are you?
I'm not.
No, he's got a black cover over it.
Brother,
There we go. Look at us go.
man, the black overlay, man. You'll love to see it. It'll get me. That'll get you. Don't let the black overlay catch you slipping. But anyways, what's going on? Lovely A to G Lifestyle fam. Welcome to episode 7 of the show. How are we doing, gentlemen?
Fantastic, man. Absolutely fantastic.
Enjoying some sushi while we talk about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. It's going to be very good.
Yeah, honestly, I would. If you could send me some, like, real quick, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
I need it.
If I could get on some of that too, I would appreciate it. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, please do sometime soon. Alrighty, we're about to get into the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial from 2022. But before we do, obviously, I have to remind you to like, share, and subscribe like I did with the last episode. Thank you to those of you who are watching live right now on YouTube or Twitch or, well, yeah, I guess just one of those two. Or if you're listening to this post-recorded on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other podcasting platforms, thank you for listening there as well. We'd love it if you would drop into our live streams, though, at some point in time, because we have lots of fun on the live streams, and we love interacting with all the listeners who want to interact with us. So definitely something you should check out if you have never checked it out before. But other than that, gentlemen, are we ready to hop in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sweet. Then, with that said, let's hop into it. We are going to kick off our discussion of Mr. Heard versus Mr. Heard. Wow, this is off to a fantastic start. Man, Mr. Heard versus Mr. Depp. So from April 11 to June 1 of 2022, a trial was held in Fairfax County, Virginia, to rule in a defamation lawsuit filed by famed actor Johnny Depp against his former wife Amber Heard. Depp filed against Heard for $50 million in damages, while Heard for $100 million in damages herself. I didn't know that actually, initially.
Wait, let me add some reference to that before we continue. Amber Heard filed for $100 million because it was twice as much as Johnny Depp filed for. That was the rationale.
Are you serious?
I want to make that
really
very clear before you continue.
Are you serious?
Because he sued for $50 million, she needs to sue for twice that.
Are you kidding me? What? No. Oh my gosh. Oh, you'll love to see it. This is just what Hollywood's about right here. I couldn't think of a better explanation as to why this is that. But goodness gracious. Beautiful. Wow. Okay. That's absolutely incredible. You literally couldn't have drawn it up better if you were from Hollywood. So, I mean, there you go. But effectively, Depp and Heard got married in February 2015, and in May 2016, their marriage did kind of hit some rough spots, and they were considering just cutting the whole thing off. So during an early stage in their divorce process, Heard claimed that Depp had physically her claims, which he obviously refuted, claiming he never did such a thing at any point in their relationship. Depp's claim for $50 million in damages was related to an op-ed, however, written or partook in by Heard in 2018, where Heard claimed that she had spoken up against sexual violence and that she had become a public figure representing domestic abuse. Now, given that there was no evidence that she was ever assaulted by Depp, Depp had solid grounds for a defamation case here. And throughout the trial, Depp's legal team sought to not only disprove the allegations of abuse, but also demonstrate that Heard had in fact been the instigator in the entire situation. So Heard's legal team attempted to defend her in her 2018 op-ed, by claiming that it was a factual release protected by the First Amendment, and that she was additionally defamed by Adam Waldman, who was Johnny Depp's former lawyer back in 2020. In line with most of the audience that followed the case when it was happening, the jury was unconvinced of Heard's team's arguments, eventually awarding Depp $10 million in compensatory damages and $5 million in punitive damages from Heard, although the punitive damages were later reduced to $350,000 due to a limit imposed by Virginia state law. This was in response to the fact that the op-ed referenced sexual violence and domestic abuse, and those allegations were false and defamatory. Heard was also awarded $2 million in compensatory damages, apparently, for the false allegations made by Waldman, again, Depp's former lawyer. apparently back in 2020 when he made false claims that she and her friends had damaged Depp's penthouse. So she was awarded zero in punitive damages and just the $2 million.
Well, it was, let me correct you there, Chris. It was that they had set up and called and staged the violence from Johnny Depp to Amber Heard. That they had staged that violence and called the police about it. Was the damages?
Okay.
That. Yeah.
Okay. There. Yeah. Fair enough. That makes sense then. Other than that, though, Depp and Heard apparently appealed against their respective verdicts, and in December 2022, both parties agreed to a settlement with Depp's lawyers, stating that he had received $1 million. So, I mean, it's an interesting case. Certainly one that caught the public attention of a lot of people. I remember being on TikTok heavily last year and seeing just tons and tons of memes flying across the app of TikTok. I was just like, what the heck? What is going on? So, I mean, Andreas, kick us off. I know you've been looking forward to talking about this for a while. What you got about this?
Well, it's just a very interesting case in that I watched the whole trial. I watched at 2x speed, just because it's forever long each day. Watched it on Nick Rekieta's channel. Shout out to Nick Rekieta. But everything in the media after this case and during the case, a significant portion of it was skewed towards Amber Heard, and a lot of what was discussed was not 100% fully accurate. Right? There was even that case where they had taken one of the TikTok videos, right, and claimed that Jason Momoa testified during the trial, and that was completely not true because Jason Momoa never testified during the trial, unless I fell asleep for a couple hours and never saw it. But he never did testify, and they were reporting as if it did occur, and this trend even continues to this day, right? Where they were saying, that this verdict is bad, and that they shouldn't have gone this way, and all sorts of other things, and it's showing that that the MSM, a 3-letter acronym for mainstream media, is almost telling a completely different story than what I saw with my own eyes during the trial, and that's pretty significant. That they're filtering and changing the story to suit their own needs. It doesn't sit well with me. In the trial, what turned me against Amber Heard was just her speaking about what occurred and how unbelievable her story was in relations to the video and photo evidence that showed up later in the trial. Right? She was talking about being drugged through glass and her feet being chopped up, right? And then being raped with a Maker's Mark bottle. And then the next day, there's video of her doing, ballerina stuff, with no visible marks across her body. And she claimed that Johnny Depp, broke his finger and destroyed it and got it cut off by slamming a phone into the wall thing, when it doesn't make sense with the rest of the story. So it was just, a lot of her claims were just so unbelievable with the evidence that showed up, as well as she used the same photograph to claim 2 separate instances of domestic abuse. However, they were the exact same photograph at 2 different times. And, and it wasn't that bad of a photograph, right? It looked like something that could potentially be done with makeup or something of that sort. She lost all credibility for me when I watched the trial pretty quickly in the story. And it was pretty incredible what her claims were. And it was just, it wasn't proven out with the facts.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that that's the way she attempted to play this out. Gavin, got any other things you'd like to discuss preliminarily?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to add on another interesting aspect of this trial. It was what was it? When was the original trial? What year? The one that took place in the UK. There was before the U.S.
I think that was like 2 years ago. It doesn't really matter the date.
No, yeah, but it was like Depp lost in that one. He sued. What was it? The
Sun.
The Daily Sun. Yeah, I have the. He sued the parent of the Daily Sun because they published an article calling him a wife beater. And in the UK courts, he was found guilty of like 12 of the 14 accounts of abuse that Heard presented, or were they quoted held up to a civil standard. And I just think that's really interesting that verdict can carry like it didn't carry over basically at all. The U.S. dismissed that case. I don't remember on what grounds.
Here, let me explain here for you a second, Gavin. As I understand it from Nick Recada's coverage, Johnny Depp was not suing Amber Heard in the Sun issue. So the burden, well, first off, it's not American law. So British law will not hold in America, first off. Second off, he wasn't suing Amber Heard in the Sun issue. He was suing the Sun. And therefore, their standard, right, is different than her standard for proof, right? He lost to the Sun, saying that the Sun defamed him. In the United States, right, all the Sun would have to demonstrate is that they did the care of understanding the facts the same way that they would do for any other story. So if they show that was the same care, then they can publish whatever they're going to publish, right? Because they would have no idea if it was true or false. So that's completely different than saying that Amber Heard defamed him, because she would know whether or not what she's saying is true. The Sun wouldn't know that, neither would the Washington Post, right? Because all they would have to do is say, okay, we're going to believe what Amber Heard said. They don't need to go and prove whether or not Amber Heard's lying or not. That's not in their duty. So there's that. Second off, the judge in the UK case was stating that because Amber Heard donated all this money to the various groups, that there's no way that she could have been lying about what she said, which is preposterous because, well, first off, later we found out she didn't donate much of anything to anybody. And second off, just because somebody donates something does not prove or disprove the validity of a claim. It's completely unrelated. And we did not get to see Amber Heard testify because it was done behind closed doors. So you couldn't see whether or not you, as the audience, believed what was stated was true, because the UK they hid that from the viewing public. So I have very little confidence in the statement that justice was served in the UK trial because, well, it was different and that the standards were different, right? So you can't say that the Johnny Depp did these things in the UK and therefore he must have done these things in the US. Well, there was a completely different purpose for that trial. So that's why it's different parties, it's different everything. So there's that.
I just wanted to bring that up because I just thought it was like an interesting prelude to everything that I have here. But you were talking about like the newspapers, and I just like if we'd be able to look at that initial article, if you gentlemen would be okay with that.
Yeah, pull it up for us.
Yeah, let me. Wash Post is making me sign in really quickly. My apologies.
Do you actually have a WashPo account?
Yeah, I know. I had like it just let me sign in, and that let me like I'm not paying for it. It's just yeah.
That's what they all say. Nice try.
I'm not paying for it. If I'm paying for it, there's going to be issues. Okay.
That's hilarious.
Here we go.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Gavin pays for his WashPo.
No, see, look, the subscribe button's still there. I'm not paying for it. But there's just a funny editor's note announcing the trial at the beginning of the article. But this article it's Amber Heard writing this thing. It's titled I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. This has to change, or that has to change.
So this is the op-ed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is the op-ed.
Nice.
Op-ed, and there are some decent things like many women, I had been harassed and sexually assaulted by the time I was of college age, but I kept quiet. I did not expect filing complaints to bring justice. I didn't see myself as a victim. That was as the marriage counselor in the trial would say, it was later true that both Depp and Heard were abused as children. So this is a valid claim. But this is one of the trigger points of the article, if you will. Then 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing domestic abuse, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out. And she was made. I don't remember what position it was. It was something at the ACLU. I think it was spokesperson of domestic violence. Andreas, correct me?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. So where is the actual fire words here?
Well, I think it's the 2 years ago, because who else would she be talking about other than Johnny Depp 2 years ago, right? Because she was in a relationship with Johnny Depp at that time. So I think that's how that was connected. And there's everything going around that. I a part of this article, even in the title, right? We saw this article is almost completely divorced from reality, because Johnny Depp got kicked off of what was it, Fantastic Beasts, because of this. He got kicked off of Pirates of the Caribbean because of this. However, Amber Heard still got Aquaman and is showing up in the second Aquaman 2, if I'm not mistaken, right?
And I think she got canceled from that one.
No, I think she's still in it. I think think there's So it's almost the reverse of what occurred, right? Her claims got Johnny Depp kicked off of everything, and then she's still being touted in Hollywood and given these roles. So we'll see if she remains in Aquaman 2, because I know there's a petition to remove her, and that might do something. Probably won't.
Yeah.
But that's just what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you hate to see it, right? I mean, it's kind of tough. Like, there's really no, why? Why would you do this? Like, if you know it's not true, then why are you creating problems that don't exist? I don't understand. Do you guys have any opinions on that?
I mean, there was the initial take that Heard was just in it for Depp's money, but that was later disproven by the UK court, saying that the $7 million divorce settlement was going to be paid to the ACLU and Children's Hospital.
But it wasn't.
But that raises an interesting point, because wasn't it Musk who paid most of the money, like Elon Musk?
Yeah, I think he was the one that paid the ACLU. And I think the Children's Health barely got anything of that money. And Amber Heard claims that money wasn't given because she got sued by Johnny Depp. But it was already a time had passed since that originally occurred, where she could have given that money. So and I believe Johnny Depp did donate to the Children's Health in her behalf, and then the lawyers got upset in the divorce case, saying that money needs to have gone to her first before it gets donated to the LA Children's thing. And if I said Children's Health Defenses, because I was thinking of Robert Barnes, not of this case. This is the LA Children's Hospital, and so that's different.
Yes, you tend to have on the brain quite a lot, we've noticed.
Robert Barnes is a smart individual.
Yes, I believe it. Yeah, I guess shout out Robert Barnes for the 10th time in the last 2 episodes. Oh man, but yeah, I mean it's interesting. So I mean the trial, because honestly I didn't know anything about this incident until the trial. I feel like that's what most Americans kind of could say about their experience with the trial too. So I mean, the trial is kind of where the gold was made. In pertinence to this entire situation. So I guess my question is, what is it about this trial that really entertained people so as much as it did? Because I mean, this is not the first time we've seen celebrity trials before, right? With like divorce settlements or what have you.
But this was televised, Chris.
Yeah.
That's what. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I don't know about you guys. I was watching Tug, that umbrella guy, way before this trial happened, and he was covering this story way before the trial occurred. And shout out to Tug. I hope to see you at Matsuri this year in Houston. That'd be pretty awesome to meet you in person. But Tug was talking about this for I think a year or 2 years before the trial occurred. And later in the trial, we found out that Adam Waldman was giving information to Tug as if Tug was the media, right? He would give Tug everything that he would give to anybody else, which proved the legitimacy of Tug's reporting, that umbrella guy, in all the stories up to the trial. So I don't know how you guys got brought in, but I got brought into this trial through Tug before the trial occurred. And then I watched the trial with Tug and Nick for the first couple of days. And then Tug went off and did his own stream, and I stayed with Nick Rekieta because, sorry, Tug, but I think Nick Rekieta's more entertaining than you are. No offense.
Sorry, Tug, but...
Sorry.
Oh, man. Gavin, how'd you get in on this case when it first was a thing publicly?
To be honest, guys, like, I only really watched this did anything with it because we were talking about it. I over the summer, I remember some of my coworkers were talking about it. I'm like, cool, I guess.
Nah.
But I just I've only really done the research because of you guys. I do remember hearing a lot about it and the hearsay. I did see some of the hearsay videos where Depp was you'd say something and go and then the lawyers would, but that was just that was really the only thing I ever heard about the trial, in all honesty.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of how I got brought in on it too, because I was just scrolling through TikTok one fine day in the summer of 2022. I just came across Johnny Depp, and I was like, Johnny Depp is on my For You page. For why? And I just watched the video, and it was just him saying stuff, and he kept being hearsayed, and I was like, excuse me, why, what? So that kind of piqued my interest when I saw that for the first time. I was like, what the heck is going on with this whole trial? I was very confused. And then obviously I learned a little bit more about it. I was like, oh, Amber is suing him over some sexual abuse stuff. I was like, oh snap, that's not good. Sexual assault.
Did you believe Amber when you originally heard that charge? I'm just curious. I'm just curious how your brain works when you originally heard the accusation.
But when I initially heard the accusation, I was very confused. I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Again, the first time I came across it was on TikTok. So I was just listening to Depp giving his very basic defense, and it didn't really seem like the other side had any actual points to make. So initially I was like, okay, so clearly this man did not do whatever he's being accused of, because you don't hearsay somebody so frequently if you don't try and distract from the main point if you actually have a case to be made. It just seems to me like Amber's side was just trying to deflect, just make it seem as if it was real, and it didn't really work, and it didn't really seem to fool most people, because most of the country probably was in alignment with me. They were like, oh, sexual assault, that's not good. And then they listened to the just little snippets of the trial, and they're like, really? Are you sure about this? Are you actually serious that this is something that happened to you? So, I mean, personally, that's kind of how I interpret it. I was like, what are we talking about here? Why? What is going on? And then I just kind of found out that's just, oh, okay, this is just petty Hollywood stuff. And I was like, okay, everything makes sense. What did you think, Andreas? Obviously, we probably have an idea, but...
What do I think? Well, I think
yes.
I think Johnny Depp was definitely defamed, right? And had actual damages. I think his damages were low, right? From, they said that he, deserves $10 million, but he lost Pirates of the Caribbean, right? Which is huge dollar amounts, right? And he lost a bunch of other opportunities in Hollywood. So I thought the judgment that he got against Amber Heard was low to begin with. Very disappointing. But, you know, it's just, I didn't see almost anything in that trial that corroborated Amber Heard's side of the story because it was dismantled so easily. But, you know, what's shocking to me, and I said it at the beginning, and I'll continue to say it, is how much the mainstream media wanted Amber Heard to be right and her side of the story to be true. And I think that's really the bigger story here, is why is there an agenda behind the MSM inside of for one side and not the other side? And why is that the case? And how do we respond to that? Because this story is not going to end, right? And you know, in a few months there'll probably be another story, and the MSM is still going to have an agenda, right? Not be telling us the whole truth and nothing but the truth, right? And they're going to skew it. And I think that's almost the bigger story, right? Is the way that the story was retold in the media being way different than the trial. And that's I think that's the bigger story. So Chris and Gavin, when you did your research for this 2022 recap, did you see that bent from the media against Depp when you were reading?
I saw a little bit of the opposite, actually. It was like the parts that, like the research that I found, it was more of like, you know, it was a little bit more objective. I didn't want to like take it one say or the other because I wanted to look at the exact instances of like the big things in question. But there was one article I did come across that was a little bit more pro Heard, but at the end of the day, I saw a little bit more of like Depp being in the forefront. But like I remember before this trial, like all of the articles I found like before this trial when I was doing research for the Daily Sun, they're like all of the articles were against Depp. Every single one of them.
Right.
Like they were scathingly against Depp. But like afterwards, it was more of just like, well, you know, there was a little bit of both. There was a little bit of abuse on both sides of the story. But I did like with that, like against Depp kind of thing. I think we should bring up the Me Too movement into this because that was like with the Washington Post. Like Amber Heard, she framed herself as like a leader of the Me Too movement, and that's just like that has been a really good thing overall, but there have been some drawbacks to it, you know? And like this case is one of the biggest drawbacks to it because like absolutely speak up if there is something wrong. And like most are like if there's any abuse. In most cases, it's probably going to be the male that's the aggressor. But in this case, it was both of them. And that is a narrative within itself. You can't be reporting on something and then one thing comes up and it'll like in the eyes of the public it'll just pop that balloon, you know. So that's why they're like, at least that's my take on why they're fighting so hard to like make this pro Heard, even though it really it's not really pro either, you know.
I might disagree with you a little bit there, Gavin, because when I watched the trial I didn't find anything credible from Johnny Depp abusing Heard in that direction. I didn't see anything that would substantiate that claim. So even in your saying of it was both people, I don't think that's fair. If you watch the trial, which you didn't, but if you were to watch it, you would see that that claim is not, in my opinion, is not true and valid, right? I saw in the trial that the abuse was really going one way from Heard to Depp, and that anytime they tried to claim it came from Depp, it was disproven, at least in my opinion, that claim, right? Where they talked about him slamming the cabinets and that being evidence of abuse, right? Well, he just learned at that moment that he was losing hundreds of millions of dollars, if I'm not mistaken, because somebody had stolen it from him. And there was no evidence that he attacked Heard in that situation, right? So it's a lot of what she was claiming did not get proven out with the evidence. What I read in the articles often is that because Heard lost this case, it was a setback for women, right? And that women are less likely to be believed because that she was proven to be a liar now. And I think that's just complete incorrect framing, because if somebody's lying about you, right, or lying about the situation, shouldn't the truth be what's more important than whatever movement you're trying to do? And shouldn't you hold that person accountable, even though it hurts your movement, supposedly, because, you don't want, a Judas. I guess a Judas isn't the right word. You don't want somebody lying to be enraptured by the Me Too movement. That's not telling the truth, right? It hurts things. So them being found out is better than them not being found out, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, just like on the abuse thing, I guess, like more of a sense of like he was really frustrated. I just really quickly though, I did want to ask about since like you watched the trial and
I watch every minute. It was long.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I tried to watch like some parts of it, but I couldn't like.
You weren't watching it with Nick. That's why you got to watch it with Nick.
I got you.
Right now, the
heals all in Andreas's eyes.
The Murdoch, the Murdoch, I think it's pronounced Murdoch, trial right now is going on with Nick, and that's good. So Monday.
To that one?
Absolutely, absolutely. Monday after work or whatever, however your schedule works, just watch Nick and go through the trial, and you'll see how entertaining those trials can be with Nick as your guide.
Wow.
Okay.
I mean, you've pestered us for a long time, so now it feels like we're kind of obligated to do that.
Yeah, I do feel like for that hangout episode,
Oh,
but back to the original point.
They don't know yet.
Oh,
Just anybody who's listening, pretend you didn't hear anything. You didn't hear anything at all. Actually, zero, nothing, nada, quiet, nothing at all.
Either way, though, I just wanted to ask about the incident where he lost the tip of his finger. I thought he wrote in blood on a lampshade and mirror?
Yeah, that seemed real sketch to me. That whole lampshade and mirror thing. He might have done it, he might not have. But some of that writing it didn't appear to be his writing, at least in my view. And it was Amber Heard's, lipstick or whatever it must be. Because it didn't really look like blood, right? At least one of those situations. And he just got his finger chopped off, right? Because she threw that glass bottle and took it off. I don't think you're thinking that clearly after that event occurs, and then you end up going to the hospital and all that other fun stuff. So, and that was the same night where she was supposedly dragged through glass, got all sliced up, and then raped with a Maker's Mark bottle. And then she's dancing the next day all fine and good with no marks on her. So,
yeah, I guess in that instance, I'm just like, if I lost the tip of my finger, my first thought would be like, oh my God, I lost part of my finger, not I need to go write something. And that's more of what I say, like it was both ways. But on that note, it was definitely a little bit more like his actions were just a little bit more like, whoa, not necessarily outright abusive, but like her words to him, if that would make sense.
Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about with her words to him. That's not very
like
clear. What are you saying?
Like the I don't know if this is an exact quote from the trial, but Heard was quoted as saying, "I'm sorry that I didn't hit you across the face in a proper slap, but I was hitting you. It was not punching you, babe. You're not punched."
From
You
Amber
don't know.
Heard to Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's more of what I mean. Like that is like that sounds like a little bit of something her trying to mess with his head is what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
there.
she's gaslighting him after
Yeah.
she was hitting him.
Yeah. That's what I'm getting at there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was a very interesting procession as a whole. Any other background tips to get into before we transition gears here?
Well, it's just a very interesting trial. It begins to, at least to me, it begins to make me less and less trustful of the media. I never trusted the media to begin with for a long time. But it's just an obvious that I wasn't a fan of it. Yeah, and it's just that's all I got to say as background before we continue and dive in and talk about takeaways and other stuff.
Nice. Gavin, anything else?
No, I mean, I think just like one more thing I want to add on about Heard is like the instances of past abuse. Like they were talking to all of Johnny's exes and they're like, yeah, no, seems out of character for him to do any of that. But with Heard, it was like she was arrested for hitting her partner and spit in her assistant's face for asking for a raise, which is that's never my first reaction. You know, it's not like I disagree.
When people ask you for a raise?
Yeah, no, people ask me for a raise all the time. I pay these too, by the way.
Man.
But yeah, that's all the background that I got that I want to add on.
Man, yeah. I mean, good stuff. Maybe not so good stuff about what we're talking about, but yeah, I think we covered it pretty decently. So, I mean, we're about to dive into some pretty good background issues here. But before we do discuss things like potentially the Me Too movement's involvement in all of this, you got to make sure you like, share, and subscribe. I'm not going to let you get away with not doing that. If you're listening, post-recorded, or watching live, do it. Do it now. It's fun. You don't want to miss out on any content that we have right now or coming up in future. But with that said, let's transition a little bit here because I'm happy Gavin brought up the aspect of the Me Too movement and how it's kind of involved in all of this. So I'm very interested to see. I know Gavin's already kind of brought it up a little bit, but Andreas, how do you feel like the Me Too movement has coupled with this particular trial?
Well, the Me Too movement is always saying believe all women, right? And that's not believing evidence, right? You should have almost two responses to when somebody brings a claim of violence or sexual assault, right? You should believe them in the sense, I'm going to give you care, but you shouldn't be, in my opinion, attacking somebody, getting them removed from whatever they're doing until evidence is presented in favor of that's disproven or not disproven in law, right? Like with Weinstein, right? He did those things, and he was removed at that time. He was removed as soon as those claims came out, basically. But with Johnny Depp, since those claims were false, right, and we removed him from basically everything, right? He took a significant amount of damage because of a lie, right? And this goes back to our Andrew Tate episode where we were talking about these two women that have claims against Andrew Tate, right? And that Eliza Blue person, right, was talking on Tim Pool, and she was saying that you got to believe all survivors, and that's just something that is completely, you shouldn't. Right? You shouldn't just inherently believe somebody because they say believe all survivors, right? And not to dig too deep because it's not the topic of this week, but we saw over the past week and a half that Eliza Blue, right, who was claiming to be a victim of human trafficking, her story is not lining up to be true, in the very least, and it's being disproven in real time. So, regardless of who you're listening to, you shouldn't just believe without evidence. That's my opinion. And that's been proven out.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
just like, yeah, I just want to add on to that a little bit. It's just like you should be like, if someone brings up that care, absolutely step up with the utmost care for that
Right.
person. Like if someone brings up one of those claims, but also in the back of your head, make sure you're weighing both options, you know. Believe your friend or believe whoever it is to the extent of which you are protecting yourself and protecting them, but not outright ruining someone else's life based off of a claim. If that claim can be backed up, you know, there's a different discussion to be had there. I would say,
Right.
you know, you probably shouldn't be backing up people who are sexually assaulting other people or abusing people, but
Right.
you shouldn't be outright assuming that, hey, this person did this based off of one claim. Let us ruin everything else for them, you know?
Right. Getting them basically removed from society, which is what they tried to do with Johnny Depp. Right.
Yeah. No.
And
Yeah.
then what they're trying to do with Andrew Tate now, whether or not it's true or not, right? Those claims, you know, that they're doing the same thing, right? Because the believe all women, believe all survivors, believe all this, believe all that is not the way you should treat um, you should treat the situation. You know, I think it was, I don't know if it's true because I haven't read the Black's Law background, but Tim Pool was talking about how we had the notion of innocent before guilty was from a biblical principle, right? Where it's better that so many guilty people go free and one innocent person, well, so many guilty people go away than one innocent person be shot, one innocent person be harmed, right? Comes from the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Where God is talking with, I think it's with Lot, or is it Abraham?
Abraham.
Is it Abraham?
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying that God will spare the city if there's so many people that are righteous, and then they reduce the number again and reduce the number again until it's just Lot and his family, and then Lot and his family leave, and then the city gets destroyed. And that's where that comes from, because you don't want an innocent person to suffer the consequences of something they didn't do, right? And so believing all women, believing all survivors goes into the face of that, because you're not allowing that presumption of innocence, right? We just watched the Tyree Nichols police incident, right? And if we were just to assume that they were guilty of second-degree murder without looking at the evidence, without watching the videos, right? We're doing the same thing, right? We're not allowing the evidence to show whether or not the people are guilty, which I think these people are guilty after watching those videos, watching those punches and those kicks, right? That lethal force was not allowed, should not be allowed when that guy was no threat to those officers. But it's the same kind of notion. If you're not looking at and you're not truly assessing the claim, what are you doing? You're assuming you're risking destroying somebody's life over something that might not be true.
No, I mean, that's kind of the way this movement has kind of trended over the years. So, I mean, when looking at a movement in general, it's important to understand why the movement is formed and whether it's actually in line with what it was formed to do. You look at a movement like maybe the Black Lives Matter movement, for instance. It was kind of started and it's kind of kept in line for the most part with what its original intentions were. I'm not going to dive too deep into that, but overall, the Black Lives Matter movement has been very consistent over its years of existence with its main message, effectively. When you look at something like the Me Too movement, it's kind of just a branch off of the original feminist movement. And originally, the feminist movement had good intentions, right? They wanted equality for women, effectively, in society. Over the years, it transitioned more towards restructuring the hierarchy rather than just equality between men and women. So it went from women saying we want to be equal to now we want more power and authority over men. And you kind of see this reflected in like what we've been talking about, the Me Too movement, and how all of a sudden we have these expectations in society that we are to believe just anybody based on the fact that they have been a victim just at face value before even considering whether their claims are true or not. We're just expected to believe them and that they are telling the truth. And obviously that has huge problems because we've seen several times abuse of that societal pressure to just believe victims, quote unquote. And a lot of victims are actual victims, but again, there are the people who abuse it. I'm trying to remember a story. I think there was a story about how there were like a football player or like a few football players. They were younger and they got incorrectly accused of sexual assault and they ended up being punished for it in some regard. Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
Yep, I do know. And they went to prison and then she later recanted the story.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, they went to prison for like 2 years or some nonsense.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's craziness. So this is the problem when you start to wander away from the initial intentions of certain movements and the goals that they were initially trying to hit at. And this actually kind of translates into the church today, believe it or not. This is a trend you can observe in the church, not just that we're accepting societal tendencies and societal trends more so in the church today than ever before, but more so that even our practice of our own faith is kind of trending away from its initial intentions. We're starting to blend into society more than stay on the straight and narrow and stay like within the intentions of what Jesus wanted us to live like, with what God wanted us to live like, and in the context of our faith. So I think that's definitely an interesting tie-in. I'm kind of interested to see what you guys think about the similarities and the parallels that we can see in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, on that note, I've been reading through the books of Moses recently, and there's like when God is guiding Moses, he's saying like, don't stray to the left, don't stray to the right, just keep going on the righteous path. And I really like, as a newer believer, I feel like, I grew up outside of the church. I only really saw what was in the news, and I've been to a couple of churches that like live up to what the news says. When I lived up in the mountains over the summer, currently in Denver now, but when I moved up to Bailey, I tried to go up to some churches up there just to get connected with my faith. And I remember one of the churches that I went to mentioned nukes before they mentioned Jesus. They were going at it with an agenda, if you will. And it's not something that we can do with our faith. Our faith, the agenda is to love others and love God. That's what the agenda is. It shouldn't be anything political or societal. The movement should be to love others. I don't know. Andreas, what do you have to say?
Well, yeah, it's just a lot of the times we as the church are doing exactly what the world's doing, right, with these situations, and we're judging people based on the claims of somebody else, right, without doing our research and digging in, right? Because if I remember correct, in the scriptures it talks about if somebody's in sin, you and another brother go up to them and talk to them about it, and then you bring it before the elders if that still doesn't resolve the issue, right? And we oftentimes in the church will say, okay, well, this person is sinning in this way, and so therefore I'm going to do this and that and the other thing without following the proper procedures for church discipline, right? We'll do whatever we do to punish them, which is not Christ-like or loving, right? Which deals with the situation. We do the same kind of cancel culture stick as the world does, and that's not right from a scriptural point of view, or right from a loving point of view, right? It doesn't help them resolve their issue, right? If we just kick them out of the church for whatever behavior they're doing.
No, yeah. And I mean, it's super important, and that's why we communicate the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to them, especially new Christians, because it seems like another societal trend that we're seeing is that we're so willing to blend in with culture because we want people to come to Jesus that we'll just compromise on certain areas of the truth.
Yeah, we'll ignore sin.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
especially that seems to be the most extreme of all cases, where we just don't even talk about sin at all,
Yeah.
as if Jesus would need to exist if sin didn't need to exist, or if sin
Yeah.
didn't exist, right? That there's no sin and we're just making mistakes, but we're not naturally imperfect. We just make mistakes. Then
Right.
what's the point of the Savior? What are we being saved from?
Right.
So I mean, we don't really tie that in as much as we should, especially the people who have a lot more say in the
Mhm.
Christian sector. I mean, you look at a lot of these mega churches, you look at people, I mean, I'm not necessarily going to call names or anything, but I mean, a lot of churches out there, they have lots of followers on social media. They have lots of people attend their services weekly. And I mean, they're just so focused on the man-centered version of Christianity, as if God loves you just the way you are, which is true to an extent, but
And
obviously
that
he
you
doesn't
don't
want
need to
you to
change.
exactly, that you don't need to change, as if the sin in your life doesn't need saving, as if you don't need to be redeemed from that. And that completely compromises what the truth of the gospel is. The truth of the gospel isn't believe, it's repent and believe.
Mhm.
So, I mean, when you start compromising on certain things like that, it's a lot easier for you as a Christian to compromise and fall in line with the world and where it stands on certain issues. This is how you end up with people like who are celebrities coming out and claiming, "Oh, I love Jesus. I mean, God is amazing." And then they end up supporting things like abortion movements, like pro-choice movements, and signing
Yeah.
petitions
Or
for
like
pro-choice
Joe
movements.
Biden, right? Who claims to be a Catholic and is doing and supporting abortion, right? Which is against the doctrine of the Catholic Church. I'm not a Catholic, but that's an obvious example,
I think another
right?
example, a similar example, would be pertaining to Nancy Pelosi. I believe there was some Catholic church that in San Francisco or that area of California that banned her from taking communion because of her stance on abortion. They were
Yeah.
flat out like, "Yeah, you can't be out here claiming to be a Catholic and you're supporting the murder of innocent children. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, no
But
communion for you."
but most American churches won't call that out,
No,
right?
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So
I do
that's
feel.
yes.
I was just gonna say, I do feel like that Nancy Pelosi example is a little bit of just like, yes, you're doing something wrong. Now you don't get to be in Jesus on our watch. I feel like that one's also a little bit crossing a red line on both sides, if you will.
Yeah. Well, it's the Catholic Church is different than Protestantism, right? They can decide if you're in the church or outside of the church, just by the way that they believe the doctrine works, right? So they can excommunicate her because of her actions, right? So that's what they believe, compared to Protestants who are more grace oriented theologically and don't think that the church itself can punish in a way that removes salvation, right? Whereas the Catholics do believe that you can punish in a way that removes salvation. Same with the Mormons, right? You've sinned against the church, and therefore the church has the ability to punish you for the Mormons, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's just a Catholic Mormon issue, right? So they're complete.
Yeah.
I mentioned it before, I believe, but I don't know why we like to group those branches in with Christianity, because they're really not Christian. They take what the Bible says and they up in a completely un-Jesus and unbiblical way. So, I mean, it's not surprising that we see them kicking people out of their churches. It's part of their doctrine. It's not biblical necessarily. It might be an abuse of what the Bible says, and a more man-centered approach to it, where like, okay, think about it. Catholics have the ability, if you're in a certain position as a priest, you have the ability to forgive people's sins. I mean, based on the way you set this practice up, it does surprise me that you feel like you have the authority as a certain member of that leadership group to kick someone out of your church. So, I mean, it does make sense. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just tying that back into the central issue of Me Too and that abuse of that doctrine, if you will, to get your own personal agenda going, and you'd see things like Depp and Heard. And
right. Yeah.
Like
trial. Yes. Yeah. Your personal agenda of Me Too, right? So that you wield it like a bludgeon against who you deem to be strong and powerful in whatever group is there. So, we should just stop doing that. Which is hard to say.
Take
right?
away the
like
week
gossip.
right there. Just stop it.
We like gossip, right? And we like to to ostracize people. It's what we like to do as humans, right? Humans are innately tribal, right? And we like to talk about other people. So that often mixes and becomes what cancel culture is, right? I think we talk, that gets applied to even, ideas of thought, right? We talked a few weeks ago about, Tate. Keep bringing it up because this story very much has the same kind of undertones that the Tate story did.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We don't know the outcome of the Tate story. He hasn't been put through trial yet, so we don't know if it's true or not. But canceling somebody, right? Removing their ability to speak is wrong, right? Just on a very basic level. And so we often do that when we judge somebody before the evidence comes out. And even we do it after the evidence comes out too, right? Because I think I said in the Tate episode, regardless of if these crimes are true or not, right? Whatever, Andrew, true or as untrue, is as true or as untrue as before the allegations came out, right? It has no effect on the truth of what he was saying, whether or not he did these heinous things.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. But it's important to consider all of those factors when we're looking at issues like this. But other than we should probably not do that, are there any other important takeaways that we have from the Depp versus her trial?
I think just reiterating that, care for the person who's made these claims that they are hurt, but don't instantly assume the absolute worst and put that into effect of the other person. I feel like your priority first should be love both parties.
Right.
Like, protect yourself, but love both parties first. And should you need to be judging people later, then do so, but don't do it without evidence. Just like in daily, everyday life, not necessarily like in specific instances of like this. If he said, she said, love them both, protect yourself, but love them both first. And then if the he said, she said was actually, whoa, he said and did, then follow suit. But yeah.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, I was kind of going to summarize it in a similar way. Domestic violence, first off, I guess it should be taken seriously. All right. So if someone comes with an accusation of domestic violence, it should be taken very seriously. And I don't think instances like this, where you have fabricated stories based on little to no evidence in favor of your argument, does any justice to actual people who have been survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, abuse, rape, stuff like that. So I think it's definitely important that we discuss these issues and make sure that the people who are fabricating stories like this in the way that Heard did are called out, because it's just not helpful to those who have actually been victims of it. But along with what Gavin was saying is when an incident like this is brought up, when someone says, hey, I've been a victim of sexual assault, right? Just approach it from an objective perspective. It's a train. It's like a line. It's a linear line where someone makes a claim and you say, okay, I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's false. But if this claim that you're making is true, then this should also be true. And if this is true, this should also be true pertaining to evidence, right? And you should just follow along the line in a sequential order. And if everything that checks out, then you can be like, wow, okay, you were really truly the victim of something bad here. Just approach it from an objective perspective, right? It's also important to note that, like we mentioned earlier, gender doesn't dictate validity. The facts do. So it's important that you do dig into actually or getting at the bottom of what actually happened to make sure that we're not wrongly accusing anybody in any of these circumstances. Andreas?
I think you summed it up pretty good there, Chris. I don't have much to say other than that. I think I've said what I need to say. So I guess I'm going to point that at Gavin.
Oh yeah,
Gavin, you've been pointed at.
I just like that. Gender does not dictate validity. That's a good saying. I like it. But I don't really have much more to add on to that. It's just also one thing. So my dad was planning on joining us for this podcast originally, but he couldn't make it. He's up in the mountains right now. But one of the things that he found, we were talking about it, and he found it really disturbing how this trial was what gripped the nation. Like, two celebrities digging up their dirty laundry for the public was what we were all devouring. Is there nothing better that we can be doing with our time than looking at someone else's flaws? It just reminds me of that verse. Like, take the plank out of your own eye before you look and the speck in your brother's eye.
It's just interesting, right? So that's probably what it was, right? It's something you don't ever get to see. So it's not, in some groups we're not judging, some were, you're right, as it was going. So, I don't think you can ascribe that it's everybody was judging with a plank in their own eye, the situation. Some were just trying to figure out what they believe about a situation, right? So I don't know if that's the same. I'm not trying to just counter your dad's point, but I'm just saying that's...
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. But either way, at the end of the day, is there nothing better we can entertain ourselves with than some celebrities' beef and dirty laundry? I feel like there's brighter things in the world that we could be doing with our time.
Like watching the Murdoch trial with Nick Ricciardo.
Getting in other people's business. Yes. Beautiful. What? Wow. What a deflection. Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. Man, look at that.
You know what you could be doing? You could be watching this or listening to this podcast. I feel like that's something else you could be doing that's better. I don't know.
I feel like you're actually right about that. I feel like people probably could be doing that, and they probably should be. I don't know why they aren't. But I mean, yeah, come on. There's something that we can do that doesn't involve us just paying all of our attention to certain people's stuff and their personal matters.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna say it so Chris doesn't have to this time. Like, share, and subscribe. We look forward to interacting with you guys in the chat soon as that becomes more and more prevalent. Because your thoughts are just as important as our thoughts, and that discussion is what we think is most important, whether it be between us three or between us and the chat. So we look forward to seeing you guys up soon next week. Next week is our final 2022 recap. We don't know what our current event is yet, but our 2022 recap is going to be this Elon Musk buying Twitter, as we think that was probably the final important event of last year that we should talk about. Unless you guys think there's something else. If you think there's another 2022 topic you want us to cover, maybe you should put that in a comment. Maybe we'll consider extending our 2022 recaps one more week after next week. But until then, like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week. 6:30 Mountain for the first episode, and then 8:45, or not 8:45. 7:45 with the second, hoping we get done in time. Peace.
Yes. Oh, and before we go, I also did want to mention really quickly, Gavin kind of alluded to it earlier, but when we're done with our 2022 recap episodes, we have something very special that we're planning. So look forward to checking the channel sometime within the next week or so for an announcement on that. But other than that, I think Andreas summed it up very well. Peace out, y'all. We'll see you on our next episode.
Jeez.